And president of Want Leverage Communications, a LinkedIn and public relations consultancy specializing in raising executive visibility. Great to be here with you again today. If you like what you see, go to wantleverage.com and download our free tip sheet, How to Make Your C-Suite Stand Out on LinkedIn, one of our specialties. And today I'm so excited to welcome Helen Jonsen. Helen has had a kaleidoscope career and she offers decades of experience as a recognized journalist, media coach, speaker, media relations pro, writer, and executive producer, having worked with major media networks, nonprofits, government, and corporations. Welcome, Helen.
Good morning, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Sure. She's been an entrepreneur and executive at the confluence of digital media and business disruption, and a strategic business and editorial advisor for publishers, startups, and companies helping to create strong multi-platform content ecosystems on digital, video, mobile, text, and social. Storytelling is just part of Helen's DNA and at the heart of everything she creates. She built a career as a journalist in newspapers, magazines, radio, and online, including working for local, national, and international news divisions. And today we're going to talk about one of her favorite subjects and mine. I'm going to call it brand ambassadors, cultivating brand ambassadors to start, but we're going to get into something else as well. Helen, tell me a little bit more about your backstory and how I love how you describe your career as a kaleidoscope. It's just such a powerful image. But tell us a little bit more about how you got here.
Yeah, well, I think it is a kaleidoscope. And the reason it's a kaleidoscope is it's all based on the same skills, right? Writing, communicating, speaking, as well as being interested in the technology behind that. And then you change them and you morph them. And like a kaleidoscope, it takes a new form and a new style. So my deep background is that of a broadcast journalist. I was on television in New York for over 10 years, more than a decade, and behind the scenes, probably 2 decades, as well as worked in Australia and Rhode Island. That all added up to running a production company for many years, doing international news coverage as well as corporate news and nonprofit work. So I've had the chance to work across the spectrum, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera. Even as a senior editor at Forbes, I ran the video side. I was a journalist on camera for them, but ran the studios and ran the teams that made that work. So I've had this broad career across communications. And I think that's given me an opportunity to understand how organizations communicate. It's also tied into my love of working with nonprofits as a volunteer, a roll up your sleeves volunteer, as well as sometimes pro bono in the background, trying to help them figure out how to engage with the communities they want to serve.
So I started off by talking about the importance of brand ambassadors, people who represent your company and who you want to represent your company at every touch point. And I called it that really just to promote this episode because I think brand ambassadors is a buzzword that people are very familiar with. But really what we're going to talk about today are mission ambassadors. And I'd like you, if you could please elaborate on that, what the difference is between a brand ambassador and a mission ambassador, and what that entails.
I would love to. Thank you for this opportunity. So the difference is a brand ambassador is a select person or group of people, perhaps influencers, or maybe they're, the top people in the company who are set up to be trained to talk about a product or a thing or a company. Mission ambassadors is different. This is where you bring in all of your stakeholders. So in a nonprofit, it might be the board, the membership, the volunteers. In a company, it might be the clients, the community people that you touch, to really give them the background and information on your mission, on your why. Explain it in a way that they are now empowered to also share it with others, which is so important. They have to feel like they can talk about the mission to others to bring other people in. So there's but part of that, at the heart of that, is letting them tell their personal stories, their why, their passion about the mission, so that it makes sense to other people and it becomes authentic and very personal.
I love that. And I think it's something that often goes by the wayside. Like to know what you think about that. But I think that organizations can be very tactical about how they approach um, their ambassadors and kind of forget that people are everywhere all the time, right? We're in different social situations, we're at conferences, meetings, cocktail parties, and anybody and everybody who works for your organization really can be a very powerful influence on your reputation and the things that you really want to be known for.
That's true. And think about it. Everyone you meet is a potential staff, member, volunteer, advocate, board member, advisor. There are so many reasons for those touch points to be valuable. So part of that is that it needs to go through your entire staffing chain, stakeholder chain, but they need to be really told that this is okay, that they can be that front person, that we want you to be that front person, right? We want you to tell your personal story that ties into the mission as well. And that becomes very empowering. It's also a great morale booster
Oh
because
my
you're
gosh.
telling everyone, all the way down to your interns, that we care about you enough to know that you have a passion for what we do and that you want to be part of it. And
Right,
yes, you
you're
could
kind
have,
of you're
that's right.
you're kind of saying that they matter,
They
right?
really
They
matter. They really matter. But you can't just leave them out there flying in the wind. I mean,
no.
it it's worth giving basic communications training, basic ideas of how do you introduce each other? How do you answer telephones? How do you talk about the mission? What is the key point that we'd like to make? Maybe what was our big win last year that we'd like everyone to know? And it makes a difference. For instance, when I did this with Girl Scouts a long time ago now, but so the numbers aren't going to be right. But there's a difference between having a conversation and say, "Oh, I'm a secretary at the Girl Scout offices," or "I'm a secretary for Girl Scouts." Name the company, name the organization, right? And we serve 44,000 girls in the area. Well, that's a
Ah,
different conversation, isn't it?
that makes so much more of an impact.
Right. So if you think, oh, they're Girl Scouts is, how many girls are Girl Scouts these days? Well, believe it or not, 1 in 4. I mean, those are different conversations, and it's a
Amazing.
nice conversation because the person then feels good about where they work. They feel good about having this conversation, and they may have just made an important connection. On
Yeah, and
top of
they
that,
feel
now,
empowered
right,
just to
and they
represent.
also need to know the next step. So I've made this connection for the organization. What do I do with it? Who do I bring them to? Who do we follow up with? Those things often fall off the desk. A lot of people don't even know what's on their website. They don't even know how to find the right contact information. So when I talk about empowering all of these levels, I mean very fundamental information sometimes. Remind them of what the history is, what the community is, what's on the website, who to call, how to have a conversation. Those are all important pieces. And you can't do it once, Julie. Your staff changes, your advocates change, your volunteers change, your affinity groups change. It has to be done with a regular cadence. I always think of, I was in this position too, but my youngest has reminded me of this. I'll say, "Oh, we went there a couple of times." And she'll say, "No, I never went there." And then you realize,
Right.
oh, the older two went there a couple of times, but the younger one, we never took her there. And that's the same with a new employee.
Right. And the the mission may your messaging will change over time as well, and what
Right.
you want to be known for at any particular moment in time, right? I mean,
And sometimes the mission does change and you've forgotten to realize that.
right.
Somebody up here knows the mission has changed, but it really hasn't gone all the way through the organization.
What do you think that COVID had an effect on mission ambassadorship in some way?
Good question, but I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that. If I thought about it, you might think that because there was less in-person connections and all of that, but you're
Right.
still having interactions, right? Whether it was companies or nonprofits, you still had to interact with your stakeholder base. So there's still a reason then, and maybe more of a reason, to empower people to make them feel good about the organization.
Right. Right. So how do you do all of this, Helen? How do you actually train mission focused ambassadors? What's your process?
It's more of a workshop process. Could be, depends on what the organization wants, obviously, but the preference is to do a few meetings with the stakeholders with a little homework in between to think about their why, to think about their passion. Start out with that basic communications conversation. Ask people how they answer the phone. How do they introduce each other? Do they know who the people are in their organization? If it's a very large organization, you have to kind of break it down a little bit. But for the sweet spot of somewhere about 50 to 100 employees, people can understand what the different levels are and what the different departments are. And that's all part of this because if they don't understand the organization they work for, they can't be empowered to be ambassadors for it. So it's steps, right? It's communications training, basic communications training, organizational knowledge and know-how, right? Very customized. What are the key mission messaging that people want to get out? Has that even been discussed? Maybe that has to be done before the whole conversation happens, right? Maybe that's a piece of it before the training. And then how to get people comfortable with that. Sometimes it's through role play, very simple, getting to know each other, but then
Right.
practicing what you would say in a networking situation. What would you say at a conference? What would you say in a basic phone call? What would you say to the UPS guy who comes in off the street and says, "Oh, I've never been here before."
Right.
And guess what? You're in Girl Scout offices, and he has 5 daughters. This is a good man to talk to.
Absolutely. Think of all those cookie sales. Um, do people do people get intimidated about serving in this way if it's new to them?
Not everyone's going to love it, right? Not everyone is going to be the one out there glad handing. But even in those quieter moments when there's an opportunity, they're going to have something to work with. So even if it's a one on one conversation over coffee and somebody says, "Oh, what do you do?" They now have more to talk about. They know that they can say more than, "Oh, I'm a secretary," or, "Oh, I'm a program manager," which is that amorphous term that, doesn't mean anything unless you can explain it, right? Um, so I think it's valuable and I think everyone gets a takeaway from it. They get better communication skills, they understand their job better, they understand their organization better, and they feel good about letting other people know what that means and maybe helping the organization grow at the same time.
You know, when you're working with C-level executives, those at the top of the organization, do you find that there's sometimes pushback or, well, I already know this. I know this already. Or is there often an openness to fine tune what they generally say to people on their own?
You've media coached and media trained. When you're doing presentation work, there's always that possibility that someone kind of knows their thing. But helping them understand how this kind of information and this kind of empowerment works for their entire organization. I mean, that's the problem sometimes. The only one who gets the media coaching is either the CEO, the official spokesperson,
Right.
maybe the head of development, maybe someone like that within a company. The marketing people know what they want to say. The advertising group knows what they want to push out the door, but not everybody else gets a chance to explore that. And I think at the highest level, if that person buys in, then the whole organization buys in. Because sometimes it's the mid-level manager, like, "Oh God, 3 days of training again," something like that. But
Sure.
the top has to be bought in because they have to be the ones who understand how their entire organization can be affected and really how their bottom line gets affected in the long run.
Tell us about the role of storytelling, Helen.
Yes.
We often talk about that in the public relations and LinkedIn work that I do, but tell us when it comes to mission focused ambassadors, how does storytelling play an important role?
People need to think about what the story is that either got them into the organization or that they're still passionate about in the organization. So I was just having a conversation with a woman who is connected to Make-A-Wish. And she I've been connected for a number of years for a different reason, but I didn't know her story. And I found out that she's a wish granter. But the reason she's a wish granter is because her brother had a wish way back in 1988. And
Wow.
the happy piece of that story is her brother is now a wish granter. That made me understand what her passion for that organization was. And while she wasn't trying to sell me, she knew I already connected to it. I felt a stronger connection because of her connection. And I think when people can tell their personal story, their personal contact, maybe that secretary had been a happy little Girl Scout and has a great story to tell about that. Maybe she was disappointed that she was never a Girl Scout, but now she gets a chance to serve all those girls. Those are stories that mean something, that resonate with other people, and things you remember, right? The storyteller becomes memorable because they've had something to share. So if you can link the organization's mission to someone's passion, then you have a true ambassador.
It's like these little gems, right? And, excavating them and bringing them out really can be like a linchpin.
Yes, yes. And it's not something people noodle about when they're doing their day-to-day work. So you need to give them room to breathe. You need to give them room to think, like all creators need room. You need room to breathe. And even storytellers, personal storytellers, need time to think about what their story is going to be and how it resonates. And it doesn't mean you memorize it. It doesn't mean that at all, but it means you have something to tell.
Right. It's got to come from your heart. I mean, you talk a lot about passion, and I think that that is one of the telltale signs of a great mission ambassador is somebody who really can communicate the passion they have for their work and for the organization they're associated with.
Right, right. And some people are going to say, look, not every guy you hire is going to have this story. No,
Right.
but I think when you have conversations with people, you find that there are those kernels, those pieces that tie in, that makes it their why, right? Why do they want to do this work? And I think that's real value.
Yeah, and what makes them feel good about doing the work. I mean, in my world, I do a lot of work on LinkedIn and raising executive visibility. And I have found over time that on uh, the executives feed on LinkedIn, who I do the ghostwriting and strategy for, people are starting now after a year or so to share their personal stories about, these are team members, and what they're doing that they're proud of in the field. And it's amazing. The nuggets, the stories that they're sharing are so incredibly powerful. Because they talk about everything that the company wants to be known for, a positive customer experience, dedicated team members, problem solving, attention to detail. All of those things are now coming through in these little stories that they're sharing on LinkedIn.
And isn't it wonderful if they can do that in person somehow or be comfortable doing that in person somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I even think that very often I will take those stories and then I will use them in a future post and give them a shout out. And I actually think that people who are seeing that happen are kind of vying to get a shout out on this executive's feed, because it's just such a feel good opportunity to be able to share your own experience and about a job well done.
Yes, yes. A friend of mine who is a nonprofit consultant, she, in one of her posts, so I'm talking about something she's made public, she kind of surveyed people in organizations to find out what they knew about the mission. And she said, 5 people, you have 5 different answers, you know, and that didn't work. And then when you went to the
No.
top, the answer was different again because maybe
Oh,
something shifted or changed. And you're right, that's one thing the pandemic has done. It has shifted how people perceive their work, but it also has shifted missions sometimes because delivery is different now, or they found that the thing that's really making money before the pandemic is now shifted to something else, or the thing that's bringing donors in, or the thing that's bringing high-level board members' interest has changed. And people haven't had those conversations.
Are there examples of people that you think really serve well in this role as a mission ambassador for their organizations? I mean,
You mean
I'm
within the organization.
within the organization. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. I mean, I often think that I've been interested in watching Sheryl Sandberg, for example, kind of phase out of her Facebook role, and I, in my opinion, I think she's had a few missteps in bringing so much of her personal life into her public presence, and she is not as focused anymore as to what her mission is. I know that she's doing a lot of different things, but I think she's kind of lost focus a bit. And I was just wondering if you had thoughts on other people at her kind of level who do this well or who don't.
I mean, we've all heard recently crazy things about the head of Kellogg's telling everybody they should eat cereal for breakfast for dinner, in a way that did not go over very well.
No.
But that's going to always be an issue, right? Especially when only one person is looked upon as the spokesperson for that organization. In the case of Sheryl Sandberg, she was the name and the face of Facebook. Other than Zuckerberg, who she covered for, who else can you name that has spoken for that organization?
Nobody.
And even people I know that have worked for the organization, sometimes it's big and it's sprawling now. Sometimes they are good about, if they're a department head or something else, they can talk about the organization. But it still doesn't resonate the same way, because you can feel that top-down heaviness, I think. Maybe as a journalist, I'm a story junkie, so I kind of pay attention to those things a little bit. But I don't know that I could name anyone directly offhand other than that. I think she's a good example, and the guy from Kellogg's a good example. But there have always been missteps. I saw recently an interview on the CEO of Boeing, who is, funnily enough, no longer the CEO of Boeing.
Wow.
Because they just said crazy things.
They're doing crazy things.
Well, that's true. That's true.
They're doing crazy things. They're saying crazy things. They're completely off message.
So how do you then take the organization and make them feel good about themselves? Well, that's hard, because it really does have to be something that people want to follow. Somebody has to want to follow and care about that mission. So they need to clean up their acts first.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the employees are feeling right now. A sense of embarrassment, humiliation, like kind of why am I here? I'm working for this company that's really off their game.
Right. So you have to make them believe it's going to get better, but it does have to get better, or there's no belief. Right?
No. And I don't know, not every day, but there have been so many incidents for them in particular already that, they've got to stop that cascade immediately.
Right. But we can't, you and I, professionals on the outside, we can't change that problem for them.
No.
All we can do is help them communicate well internally and not make it feel like a Band-Aid.
Right. Absolutely. So this has been such a great conversation. To wrap it up, what kind of advice would you offer our viewers to develop their ambassadors into more mission-focused ones?
It needs to start with the top buying in, that understanding that everybody has a role to play in this, and that there's a value in it on both externally and internally, right? That empowering your employees with good communication skills, but also with the words and understanding and the feeling for the mission, is right for you and right for the whole organization.
Helen, how can people get in touch with you?
I think it's on the banner here. I'm at
Yeah.
helenjonsen.com, my spelling of Johnson, which is Jonsen. And I am here on LinkedIn as well. I'm active on LinkedIn and very happy to hear from anyone who has any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today. And everyone else, I'll